Hello everyone. In today's video, let us learn about site-directed mutagenesis. So before moving on to site-directed mutagenesis, let us know what is mutagenesis. In molecular biology and genetics, mutations are changes that occur in the genome. So when we generate this mutation or when we create this mutation in the genome, then we call it as mutagenesis. Muta means change, genesis means giving birth to. So we are actually generating the mutation. That is why it is called as mutagenesis. Now mutagenesis is of two types, that is random mutagenesis and site-directed mutagenesis. Random mutagenesis means the mutation can occur at any part of the DNA. The mutation that occurs at any part of the DNA will be random mutagenesis. This type of mutations can be caused by radiations, chemicals, viruses, transposons, etc. Whereas site-directed mutagenesis, we will see what it is. So site-directed mutagenesis is a molecular biology technique which is often used in genetic engineering, wherein we are going to create a mutation at a defined site. Here, the mutation will not occur at any part of the DNA. We are going to select a defined site, a particular site on the DNA molecule, and we are going to mutate that particular site. That is why it is called as site-directed. Site means at a specific site, we are going to allow the mutagenesis to occur. That is why it is called as site-directed. Random mutagenesis can occur on any part of the DNA. Randomly the mutations are going to occur. That is why it is called as random mutagenesis. Whereas in site-directed mutagenesis, we are going to create a mutation at a definite site on the DNA, at a particular site on the DNA. That is why it is called as site-directed mutagenesis. To perform the site-directed mutagenesis, we are going to use certain molecular biological technique and genetic engineering tools to create this site-directed mutagenesis. Site-directed mutagenesis is also called as site-specific mutagenesis. As I told you, we are going to create mutation at a specific site on the DNA molecule. It is also called as oligonucleotide directed mutagenesis because we are going to use oligonucleotides here to create the mutagenesis. In my further slides, you will be seeing how an oligonucleotide is used for creating mutagenesis. Now, what is this oligonucleotide? Oligonucleotide are a chain of nucleotide. The chain is made up of 10 to 15 nucleotides or sometimes 25 to 45 nucleotides, which is less than 100. If there is less than 100 nucleotides in a chain, then that is called as oligonucleotide. So this mutagenesis, we are going to use a oligonucleotide. Therefore, it is also called as oligonucleotide directed mutagenesis. So you have to remember, in site-directed mutagenesis, we are going to create mutation at a specific site in the DNA molecule. So let us see the history. In 1978, Michael Smith was the first person who proposed site-directed mutagenesis by using oligonucleotides, and the method that he used was a primer extension method. He used DNA polymerase for carrying out this PCR method. So we will see primer extension method also in this video. So what is the importance of carrying out this site-directed mutagenesis? Why do we have to carry out site-directed mutagenesis? This is used to study the structure and function of a protein. So let us see how do we analyze the structure and function of a protein by site-directed mutagenesis. So here in this image, you can see that the green DNA molecule that you are seeing is a wild type DNA molecule. Now, this has a codon. 3 nucleotides together will give rise to a codon. It gives rise to a codon. So, which codes for, say for example, here CAG is the wild type. So, for this, we are going to use a primer with a mutation. We are going to synthesize a primer. Here, we are going to do PCR based technique. So, here we will synthesize a oligonucleotide primer which is having a mutation. So you can see instead of GTC, the primer here is GCC. So one nucleotide we have changed here. So when you do PCR, we get the product like this, CAG and GCC. So you can see here the wild type CAG and GTC was coding for an amino acid valine. After translation, it was coding for an amino acid valine. The wild type, it was coding for valine. CAG codes for valine or GTC codes for valine. Whereas when you mutate it, GCC primer is added. So a mutation has occurred in the genome. So when you mutate it, instead of valine, it codes for threonine. So one specific amino acid is changed here. So if you want to study the structure of a protein or a function of the protein, you have to change the amino acids present in that protein and see how the protein is going to react. Say for example, a particular amino acid which is important for the active site of a protein. If you change that particular amino acid, what happens to the protein? How that protein is going to function? If you want to study that, then you have to go for site-directed mutagenesis. So in site-directed mutagenesis, a particular site is mutated so that the amino acid produced by that particular site is also mutated. So in a protein, if that amino acid is exchanged or if it is changed or if it is removed, how the protein is going to react? How the structure of the protein is going to get changed, or how the function of the protein is going to get altered. To look all this, we should carry out site directed mutagenesis. Here we can change one particular amino acid, or we can change more than one amino acids as well to study the structure and function of the protein. So this is the importance of site directed mutagenesis. So let us see the molecular mechanism of site-directed mutagenesis. Here we are going to take a plasmid or a target DNA. It can be a linear DNA as well. So you are going to take a target DNA. To this target DNA, we are going to synthesize the oligonucleotide primer. So the oligonucleotide primer which we are going to synthesize will contain the mutation. So you can see in this diagram there is a cross mark which says that the primers are mutated. So the primers are mutated such that the gene of interest in the target DNA, the gene of interest will be present. So the gene of interest that we have to mutate is our gene of interest. Any part of DNA that we have to mutate is going to be our gene of interest. So to the gene of interest, for where we have to mutate, there to that place we are going to synthesize a primer which has a mutation. So this primer is carrying a mutation. So now what we do is we will let the primer to anneal, to join to this target DNA at the site of gene of interest. Where we are doing this? We are doing this in the PCR. So we are going to undergo a PCR method. Here we are going to amplify this using a PCR technique. So what we do? We have created a primer. We are going to allow the primer to anneal to the target DNA at the site of gene of interest. The primer has a mutation. Now when you allow it to amplify in the PCR, what happens after amplification? You get two DNA molecules, two types of DNA. One is wild type DNA and the primer, it synthesizes the DNA here after amplification. So you get a mutated DNA as well after amplification. To carry out the amplification procedure, to carry out the PCR procedure, what you have to do here? You have to add a DNA polymerase into PCR. So what type of DNA polymerase are you going to use here? Here you have to use a PFU DNA polymerase and not Taq polymerase. If you remember, always in PCR we use Taq polymerase because it can withstand the higher temperature, the melting temperature in the PCR condition. Whereas PFU DNA polymerase can also maintain the it can control the temperature. It can actually withstand the temperature. PFU DNA polymerase can also withstand the temperature. But why are we not using Taq polymerase? Because the exonuclease activity. What is exonuclease activity? The removal of wrong bases activity is very less in Taq polymerase. Therefore, we have to use a high fidelity polymerase which has a higher exonuclease activity. So we use PFU ultra DNA polymerase which is a high fidelity polymerase which can which has a high exonuclease activity, which can remove the wrong nucleotide bases very easily. So such DNA polymerase we have to use here, so that we do not get any secondary mutations in the during the amplification. So after amplification, as I told you, we get two DNA. One is our parental DNA or the template DNA. So one is our parental DNA or the template DNA. The other one is the mutated DNA. Using our primers, we have mutated this DNA. So once the amplification is over, after the PCR is completed, we are going to check these two DNA under agarose gel electrophoresis to see whether the amplification has happened properly or not. To check this, we are going to use an agarose gel electrophoresis. So we are going to run it on agarose gel electrophoresis to see whether the amplification has happened or not. After this, we are going to purify these two DNA, parental DNA and the mutated DNA, and we are going to add DPN1 to it. DPN1 is a restriction enzyme. So DPN1 restriction enzyme will identify the methylated adenine. Where is the methylation present? Methylation is present on the template DNA. We all know that always a parental DNA molecule will have a methylation. So DPN1 identifies the methylated DNA. Who is the methylated DNA here? Parental DNA is the methylated DNA. It identifies the methylated DNA and it will digest the parental DNA. So you can see this image. The parental DNA or the template DNA is digested by DPN1 restriction enzyme. DPN1 restriction enzyme identifies methylated DNA and it will digest the template DNA. We don't want template DNA because we wanted the mutation to occur. So we are going to use a mutated DNA. So once the parental DNA is digested, the mutated plasmid is now transformed into ultra competent E. coli cells. What is this ultra competent E. coli cells? You would have studied competent. Competent cells are the cells which are capable of taking up the DNA. Now ultra competent cells are the ones which has more capacity to take up the DNA. How do you create ultra competent cells? By using rubidium or lithium. You have used calcium chloride method for creating competent cells. Similar to that method, instead of calcium chloride, we use rubidium or lithium to create the ultra competent cells. So here we use ultra competent E. coli cells where the plasmid DNA is transformed into this ultra competent E. coli cells. Once we transform it, we get the cloned cells. So these cloned cells are going to repair the nick that is present in the plasmid DNA. The nicks, the joining will not be ligated. The ends of the ends of the mutated DNA will not be ligated. So in the transformed, once the E. coli when the cells are getting transformed by this plasmid, the mutated plasmid gets repaired in this transformed E. coli cell. So after that, the clones are screened by sequencing the genome. So screening will be done by sequencing method. So this is how we get the mutated plasmid, and in the cell the mutagenesis we are going to create. This is how a mutagenesis is created in the cell. We are going to use a mutated primer. We will allow it to amplify. After amplification, we get two types of DNA, that is parental DNA and the mutated DNA. The parental DNA is digested and the mutated DNA is transformed into E. coli cells and it is allowed to grow. Once it is allowed to grow, it is screened by sequencing. So here the transformed E. coli cells are mutated E. coli cells. We have successfully created a mutagenesis here. So that is about how we create a site-directed mutagenesis. But there are certain factors which you have to keep in your mind. That is, the polymerase that we use here is PFU because it is a high fidelity polymerase. It has higher exonuclease activity. That is why we use high fidelity polymerase. Then This parental strands are separated by DPN1. As I told you, it is going to identify the methylated DNA. So the methylated DNA will be always a parental DNA, so it is going to digest it. If we do not digest the parental DNA, then the false positive results will occur. To avoid this false positive results, we have to digest it using DPN1. So then we have seen the factors. Then how do we design the primer for this? As I told you, two primers are required here. Both the primers are allowed to anneal to the parental strand. It should be able to anneal to the parental strand. Like that we have to design the primer. The primer length should be about 25 to 45 nucleotides. That is on either side of the mutation that we have created. In the primer, mutation will be there. On either side of the mutation, 10 to 15 nucleotides should be present such that it gets annealed properly to the parental DNA. So the mutation should be at the center, and on either side of the mutation, 10 to 15 nucleotides should be present such that it gets annealed properly to the parental DNA. Since the length of the primer is very long, the melting temperature will be here, that is 78 degrees Celsius. Next, we have to look for PCR conditions. As I told you, high fidelity polymerase will be used, DNTPs will be used, that is deoxyribonucleic acid, that is nucleotide triphosphates will be used, DNTPs, dinucleotide triphosphates will be used. Then amplification, very important. Here we usually in PCR we go for 30 cycles of amplification, but here we carry out only 12 to 15 cycles of amplification, because if we carry out more amplification cycle, it might lead to secondary mutations. To avoid that, we only let it to occur 12 to 15 cycles of amplification. We do not allow it to go for 30 cycles of amplification. So the temperature is 78 degrees Celsius. The melting temperature is 78 degrees Celsius. Therefore, it is possible that the DNA gets denatured. To stabilize the DNA, we use DMSO and glycerol. It is very important to add DMSO and glycerol for the stabilization of DNA. So that is about the molecular mechanism. Now we will move on to the different methods of site-directed mutagenesis. We will see what are the different methods in which we can undergo site-directed mutagenesis. There are 4 methods. One is known as single primer method, single primer PCR based mutagenesis, cassette mutagenesis, nested PCR or primer extension method, and inverse PCR method. So let us move on to the first method, that is single primer method. In this method, M13-Phage DNA is used as a target DNA. M13-Phage DNA which is used as a target DNA. Now this is a single stranded DNA molecule. So this is going to be our gene of interest. So in the single stranded DNA molecule, our gene of interest lies. So wherever we have to undergo mutation, that is our gene of interest. So we are going to synthesize a oligonucleotide primer which will anneal to our gene of interest. And now this primer carries a mutation. The primer which we have synthesized will have a mutation. So we will allow the primer to anneal to the parental DNA, that is our single stranded M13-Phage DNA. So we have allowed the primer to anneal to the single stranded M13-Phage DNA where the mismatch is present. In the primer, mismatch is present, mutation is present. Then we will allow it to undergo amplification in the PCR. So here again we will use a PFU polymerase because of its high fidelity. DNTPs are added, DNA ligase is added, and we are allowing the reaction to occur in the PCR. So what happens in the PCR? When we give all the conditions, an amplification is going to take place. So a newly synthesized mutated DNA will be produced in the PCR after the amplification. So this is checked under agarose gel electrophoresis, and then it is purified from agarose gel electrophoresis. So the newly synthesized DNA strand will have the mutation. So this mutated DNA is transformed into ultra competent E. coli cells. As I told you, why ultra competent E. coli cells? As I told you, we told you that is 12 to 15 cycles of amplifications we will do. So the amount of DNA that we get is very less. So ultra competent DNA cells has the higher ability to take up the DNA. Therefore, we use ultra competent E. coli cells. So once the cells are being transformed, once the mutated plasmid is being transformed to E. coli cells, the E. coli cells will start dividing. So when it divides, it is possible that we get the wild type DNA and the mutated DNA. The cells having wild type DNA and the mutated DNA. So we have to screen them by sequencing. When we sequence the DNA, we get the wild type and the mutant type. So wild type will be removed and the mutant type will be retained. So this is how we are going to create a mutagenesis, site-directed mutagenesis, by using single primer method. So here, why single primer method? Here the oligonucleotide primer we are using is single. Earlier you saw in the molecular mechanism there were two primers that was used, but here we are using only one primer because the target DNA is single stranded DNA. Next we will move on to cassette mutagenesis. In cassette mutagenesis, the target DNA will have two restriction sites where we have to carry the mutagenesis. That is between the gene of interest. The gene of interest lies between the restriction sites. So here the restriction sites, if you can see in this diagram, it is HIND3 and ECO-R1. So between these two restriction sites, our gene of interest lies. So here we are not going to use a primer. Here we are going to use a oligonucleotide fragment, which is a double-stranded oligonucleotide fragment in which we have caused a mutation. So the double-stranded oligonucleotide is synthesized in which a mutation is present. So with the mutation, we are going to synthesize a double-stranded oligonucleotide. We are going to cut at the restriction sites and remove the gene of interest, and we are going to replace the gene of interest with the double-stranded oligonucleotide that we have synthesized, which has a mutation. So we are going to place the mutated oligonucleotide DNA that we have synthesized in the region of our gene of interest where it was present. So now what we have created? We have created a mutated DNA. Now this mutated DNA is transformed into E. coli cells. So when the mutated DNA is transformed into E. coli cells, the E. coli takes up the transformed DNA and it starts growing. So after the transformed E. coli cells are grown, it is being screened by sequencing. So by sequencing, we are going to screen whether the E. coli cells are actually mutated or not. This cassette mutagenesis is a 100% efficient method because here we are not going to use primers. Here directly we are removing the gene of interest and adding the mutated oligonucleotide such that the mutation happens 100% efficiently. That is about cassette mutagenesis. Remember, in cassette mutagenesis, we are not using a primer. Instead, a double-stranded oligonucleotide with the mutation is replaced in the place of gene of interest, where the gene of interest is cut at the restriction sites by the restriction enzymes. That is about cassette mutagenesis. Moving on to the next type, that is nested PCR or primer extension method. The advantage here is it is 100% efficient. In the other methods, only 2 or 3 mismatches we can create, could be created. But in this method, we can make many mismatches can be done. Additions and deletions of bases can be done. In other methods, in the single primer method, we cannot go for insertion of bases or deletion of bases. Insertion mutation or deletion mutation cannot be carried out, whereas here it can be carried out. That is the advantage of nested PCR or primer extension PCR method. In this method, 4 sets of primers are required. That is, Two will be internal and overlapping primers. Internal and overlapping primers. So in this image, if you see C and B are the internal and overlapping primers, and another two that we require is external and non-overlapping primers. So A and D, if you see, they are external primers and they are non-overlapping primers. So both the primers are usually put on either end of the DNA. That is, one will be present at the 5' end and the other one will be present at the 3' end. A and D are called as flanking primers. B and C are called as internal mutagenic primers. Here we are going to carry out the PCR in two steps. So first PCR will be done and the second PCR will be done. For this we have to set up two reactions. Two reactions has to be set up for this type of primer extension method, for this method. So in the first PCR, in the first reaction, what we do is we take the target DNA and we will allow the target DNA to get amplified by using A and B primers. So first we use only in the first reaction. Remember, in the first reaction we use only A and B primers. By using A and B primers, we will allow the amplification to occur. That is the first reaction. In the second reaction, we use C and D primers for the amplification. So when we do this, after first PCR, we get this type of DNA. That is, two types of DNA. Both the DNA will undergo the amplification. So we are going to get two sets of DNA. After we get the two sets of DNA, in the second reaction, we are going to use C and D primers. In the second reaction, we are going to use C and D primers. In the first reaction, we will use A and B primer. In the second reaction, we use C and D primer. So when we use this, we get two sets of DNA. And remember here, where is the mismatch? It is present in the B and C. Our B and C primers are the primers which are carrying the mutation. So in the first reaction, only first PCR we are going to carry out. In the first reaction, we use A and B primer. In the second reaction setup, we use C and D primer. So after first PCR, we get the DNA like this, where mutation has occurred. But here we have two sets of DNA because we have carried out in two reaction setups. So now B and C had the mutation, so both the DNAs are having the mutation. Now we are going to mix both the DNAs. We are going to mix both this DNA and we are going to carry out the second PCR method, second PCR condition, where when we put it for second PCR, both the DNAs, both A and B DNA and C and D DNA that is being separated, when we are going to mix it and put it for second PCR, where they both get amplified and we get a final product with a mutation in it. I repeat, in this method, we are going to carry out two sets of reaction and two PCR. In two sets of reaction, in the one set we use A and B primers, in the other set we use C and D primers, wherein B and C are having the mismatch. So in the after first PCR, we get two products, wherein A and B product, C and D product, where both are having mutation. It's because B and C are the ones which were carrying mutation. Now both these DNAs are mixed together and a second PCR is carried out. So when the second PCR is carried out, both the DNA gets ligated and we get the final product where the mutation is present. Now this final product is checked by agarose gel electrophoresis, by running it on agarose gel electrophoresis for the mutation. So once we get to know that the mutation has occurred, it is transformed into the ultra competent E. coli cells. After it is transformed to ultra competent E. coli cells, it is screened by sequencing. Now here we should remember the primer length should be always 10 to 12 nucleotides length, and the temperature, the melting temperature is 50 degrees Celsius. In other methods, it was only 12 to 15 cycles of amplification we used to carry out. Here we can carry out 30 cycles of amplification. That is about nested PCR or primer extension method. The only disadvantage of this method is here 2 rounds of PCR should be carried out. Since we are carrying out 2 rounds of PCR, it is possible that secondary mutations might occur. That is the only disadvantage of nested PCR or primer extension based PCR. The last method is inverse PCR based site directed mutagenesis. It was developed to amplify regions where only the sequence of flanking DNA are known. In this method, point mutations, insertions, deletions can be done. That is why it is advantageous over other methods of site-directed mutagenesis. In inverse PCR, the 2 primers are required. Now, these 2 primers are inverse. They are not overlapping. They are non-overlapping. This method is very much similar. This is exactly like the molecular mechanism that I explained is exactly same in inverse PCR. The only change is the primers that we are going to use are in the opposite direction. They are in the non-overlapping direction. So if you see this image, there are 2 primers that is used. One of the primer is carrying the mutation and both are non-overlapping and they are in the opposite directions. So you're using a non-overlapping primers and the inverse primers here. Whereas in nested PCR you used a overlapping primer, whereas here you're using a non-overlapping primer which is inverse, and this was developed by Helmsley in 1989. Helmsley. Helmsley is the spelling of the scientist name. Helmsley in 1989. It was designed by this scientist. Now, the inverse PCR, as I told you, primers, we are going to use inverse primers which we will allow it for PCR condition. We will put it in the PCR for amplification. So, when we amplify, because of inverse PCR, we get the linear DNA molecule. Now this DNA molecule will have the mutation. If you see, the amplified product is like this where the mutation is present. So this is being ligated. It is ligated using DNA ligase so that it forms a circular DNA molecule. Now the circular DNA molecule is having the mutation. So this mutated DNA is now transformed into E. coli cells, into the ultra competent E. coli cells, and it is then before transforming into ultra competent E. coli cells, during amplification it is possible that sometimes the mutated DNA will not be produced. The parental DNA might remain like this. So we have to use DPN1 digestion. DPN1 has to be used for digesting the template DNA. So we are going to take only the mutated DNA which will be checked under agarose gel electrophoresis, and we will then allow it to self-ligate. The linear DNA will be then ligated. After ligation, it is transformed into the E. coli cells, where this E. coli cells are going to carry the mutated DNA, and then the E. coli cells are screened by sequencing. This is how inverse PCR based directed mutagenesis is carried out. So in all of these methods, at a specific site, at the gene of interest, we are going to carry out the mutation. That is why it is called as site directed mutagenesis. Let us move on to the applications of site-directed mutagenesis. It is used in investigative tools. What is this investigative tools? As I told you, it is used to study the structure and the function of protein by altering the DNA sequence at a specific site. So when you create a mutation at a specific site in a DNA, you can check how the functioning of the protein and what are the properties of the protein. All this can be checked. Checking means investigating. That is why it is called as investigative tools. It is used as investigative tools. It is also used in commercial applications, like for example in detergent industries it can be used. Say the proteins may be engineered to produce proteins that are tailored for a specific application. We can produce a protein which is made for specific applications. Say for example, in laundry detergents, there will be methionine. A wild type protein will have methionine. So if you remove the methionine, it is possible that the bleach that you are using in laundries can be oxidized. If you remove or inactivate this methionine, the protein becomes inactivated and the bleach can become oxidized. In certain cases, this methionine may be replaced by alanine, thereby making the protein active in the presence of bleach. In the presence of bleach, if you replace methionine by alanine, the protein becomes active. In certain conditions, methionine can be oxidized by bleach, therefore inactivating the protein in the process. So these are the various commercial applications. It can be used in detergent industries. That is one of the example. Investigative tools, it is used for studying the structure and function of the protein, as I told in the starting of my video. These are the various applications of site-directed mutagenesis. Thank you class. If you have any doubts, you can message me.